Hello friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. The coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but Deputy Sarah Chen kept the mug pressed between her palms anyway, drawing what little warmth remained from the ceramic. Outside the substation's bulletproof windows, the West Texas desert stretched endlessly under a moonless sky, broken only by the occasional sweep of headlights on Highway 285. The digital clock on her dispatch console read 02:47 a.m. when the first call came in. Brewster County Sheriff, this is Deputy Chen. Static crackled through the headset before a man's voice emerged, thin and strained. Deputy, this is gonna sound crazy, but I think someone's following me out here on 285, about mile marker 127. Chen's fingers moved automatically to her keyboard, pulling up the incident log. Can you describe the vehicle, sir? That's the thing. I can't really see it clearly, just headlights in my mirror. Been there for maybe 20 miles now. Every time I speed up, it matches. When I slow down, it slows down too. What's your current location? Just past mile marker 129, heading west toward the junction. Chen frowned. Mile marker 127 to 129 in 20 miles of following? The markers were spaced at single-mile intervals. Sir, you said the vehicle has been following you for 20 miles, starting at marker 127. A pause. Yeah, that's right. And you're now at marker 129? Yes, ma'am. Chen made a note in the log. Caller confused about distance markers. Possible intoxication or fatigue. Can you pull over at the next safe location? I'll dispatch a unit to check on you. Aye, okay, there's a pullout coming up ahead. The line went dead. Chen immediately radioed Unit 23, Deputy Marcus Rodriguez, who was patrolling the western sector. 23, respond to Highway 285, mile marker 130 area. Possible harassment complaint. White male caller reporting vehicle following him. Caller seemed disoriented about location. Rodriguez's voice came back steady and professional. Copy that. Dispatch. ETA approximately 15 minutes. Chen logged the call and returned to her paperwork, but something nagged at her about the conversation. She pulled up the county GIS system and traced Highway 285 westbound. Mile markers 127, 128, 129, 130, all properly spaced at 1 mile intervals. If the caller had been followed for 20 miles starting at 127, he should be at marker 147, not 129. Either he was lying, confused, or... The radio crackled. Dispatch, this is 23. I'm at the 130 marker area. No vehicles visible, no pullouts with anyone stopped. Can you raise the caller again? Chen tried the callback number from her system. It rang once, then went to a generic voicemail. 23, unable to recontact. Continue patrol. Copy. Hey, dispatch. You said the caller mentioned starting at marker 127, followed for 20 miles? Affirmative. I'm looking at marker 130 right now. There's no marker 127 on this stretch. This section starts at 128 and runs to 135. Marker 127 would be about 8 miles back toward town. Chen felt her coffee mug slip slightly in her grip. She double-checked the GIS display, zooming in on the highway markers. Rodriguez was right. There was no mile marker 127 in the western sector. The numbering jumped from 126 in town to 128 at the county line. She keyed her radio. 23, can you confirm the marker numbers in your current area? Roger, I'm parked right next to marker 130. Sign is clear, reflective tape intact. Previous marker heading east would be 129. Next marker west is 131. Chen logged the discrepancy and marked the call as unable to locate. Possible false report. But as she closed the incident, another detail caught her attention. The timestamp on the original call showed 2:47 a.m. The current time read 2:51 a.m. Rodriguez had responded immediately, but his ETA was 15 minutes. By her calculation, he should still be en route, not already on scene. She reached for her radio to question this, but before she could key up, another call came through the main line. Brewster County Sheriff, Deputy Chen speaking. Ma'am, I need to report a break-in at the Roadrunner truck stop, out on 285. Someone's been messing with our security cameras. Chen recognized the voice. Billy Hawkins, the night manager at the truck stop near mile marker 132. What's the nature of the damage, Billy? That's just it, there's no damage. But I've got 3 hours of footage missing from last night, right around the time frame when that weird stuff was happening. What weird stuff? The trucker who called y'all about being followed. Joe Mendez. He's one of our regulars. Came in this morning all shook up, said he called the sheriff's department about some vehicle following him for miles out there. Chen felt her pulse quicken. Billy, I don't show any call from a Joe Mendez in our logs. Well, he sure says he called. Got the incident number and everything. Said the deputy told him to pull over at the next safe location. Can you put Joe on the line? He's not here anymore. Left about an hour ago, heading back east toward San Antonio. But deputy, here's the thing that's got me spooked. Our security footage shows him pulling in here at 3:15 a.m., but he swears he made that call to y'all at 2:47. Chen checked her current time, 2:58 a.m. Billy, it's not even 3 a.m. yet. A long pause. Ma'am, my clock here shows 4:12 a.m. So does the timestamp on our security system. Chen looked at every timepiece visible from her position. The dispatch console digital display, her wristwatch, the wall clock above the evidence locker, her computer monitor. All showed variations of 2:58 a.m. Billy, can you double-check your time source? I'm looking at 3 different clocks, Deputy. All show the same time, and our security system syncs with the atomic clock network every hour. Chen made careful notes in the incident log, documenting the time discrepancies. 2 possible explanations presented themselves. Either Billy's clocks were malfunctioning despite his claims of atomic synchronization, or there was some kind of coordinated equipment failure affecting different locations. Highly unlikely, but not impossible if there had been some kind of electromagnetic interference or solar weather event. She was about to research recent space weather reports when Rodriguez's voice came over the radio again. Dispatch, I'm getting some strange readings out here. What kind of readings, 23? My GPS is showing my location as mile marker 127, but I'm still parked next to the sign that clearly reads 130, and my odometer shows I've driven 23.7 miles since leaving the station, but my route log only accounts for 18.2 miles. Chen felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert night air. 23. What's your current fuel level? 3/4 tank, same as when I left the station. If Rodriguez had driven nearly 24 miles instead of 18, his fuel consumption should reflect the difference. Either his odometer was malfunctioning, his fuel gauge was stuck, or 23, return to station for equipment check. I want to run diagnostics on all your vehicle systems. Copy that. ETA 20 minutes. Chen made additional notes in the log. 2:47. Call received from unknown male, reported following vehicle. Time-distance discrepancies in caller's account. 2:51. Unit 23 on scene. No contact located. Mile marker confusion. Caller claimed 127. No such marker exists in Sector 0258. Truck stop manager reports missing security footage. Time sync issues. Unit 23. Reports GPS odometer discrepancies. She leaned back in her chair and stared at the growing list of anomalies. 3 different time tracking systems showing different readings. GPS coordinates that didn't match physical markers. Distance measurements that didn't add up. The rational explanations were all there. Equipment malfunctions, human error, possible coordinate system that was overlooked in the mapping database. But Chen had been working dispatch for 8 years, and she'd never seen this many simultaneous system failures without some kind of obvious cause, like a power surge or storm. She pulled up the county's equipment maintenance logs, looking for patterns. The dispatch console had been serviced 6 months ago and was functioning normally. Rodriguez's patrol unit had passed its monthly inspection just 2 weeks prior. The truck stop's security system was relatively new, installed less than a year ago. At 3:15 a.m., according to her console clock, Rodriguez called in his return to the station. Dispatch, 23 is back, ready for that equipment diagnostic. Chen walked out to the motor pool where Rodriguez was shutting down his patrol unit. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, she could see the confusion on his face. Marcus, walk me through exactly what happened out there. Rodriguez pulled out his patrol log, a small notebook he kept in addition to the electronic logs. Left the station at 2:52 according to my watch, drove west on 285, normal route. Arrived at mile marker 130 at 3:07, 15-minute drive time. That part's all normal. But your odometer? That's where it gets weird. I reset my trip odometer when I left, like always. When I got to marker 130, it showed 23.7 miles. But I've driven that route probably 50 times. It's exactly 18.2 miles from here to marker 130. Chen walked around to look at the odometer display. The trip meter showed 44.1 miles, exactly double what it should show for a round trip to mile marker 130. Marcus, is it possible you took a detour or got lost? Sarah, I've been patrolling this sector for 3 years. I could drive that route blindfolded. And look, he pointed to his GPS unit mounted on the dashboard. The route log shows a straight line from here to marker 130 and back. No deviations, no side trips. Chen examined the GPS display. The route was indeed a perfect straight line along Highway 285, with waypoints marked at regular intervals. But the total distance calculation showed 44.1 miles, matching the odometer. Could the GPS be corrupting the distance calculations somehow? Maybe. But then how do you explain this? Rodriguez showed her his handwritten log. I made notes of every mile marker I passed with timestamps. Look at the sequence. Chen read through the entries. 2:52, departed station 2:54, mile marker 1, 24, 2:56, mile marker 1, 26, 2:59, mile marker 1, 28.0302, mile marker 1, 29.0305, mile marker 1, 30.0307, mile marker 1, 31.0309, mile marker 1, 30, you passed marker 130 twice. According to my notes, yeah, but I don't remember turning around or backtracking. I was driving straight west the whole time until I got your call to return. Chen stared at the log entries. The timestamp showed a logical progression, 2 minutes between most markers, which was consistent with Rodriguez's normal patrol speed. but the sequence showed him passing marker 130, then 131, then 130 again, as if he had somehow looped back without realizing it. "Marcus, do you remember seeing marker 131? Rodriguez frowned, concentrating. Actually, no. I wrote it down, but I don't specifically remember seeing it. That's weird, right? I usually notice all the markers consciously. And you don't remember turning around?" Number I was focused on looking for the caller's vehicle, scanning the shoulders and pullouts, but I never made any deliberate turns or course changes. Chen photographed the patrol log with her phone and made additional notes in the incident report. Two possibilities emerged. Rodriguez had experienced some kind of brief disorientation or micro-sleep episode that caused him to miss his turnaround, or there was something affecting the reliability of the mile marker system itself. She decided to research the highway marker maintenance records when she got back inside, but first she wanted to complete the vehicle diagnostic. "Let's check your fuel consumption," she said, looking at the gauge. Rodriguez started the engine and let it idle. "Still shows 3/4, same as when I left, but if I really drove 44 miles instead of 36, it should be noticeably lower." Chen made a note to have the fuel gauge calibrated, though she suspected it was working correctly. A patrol unit with a 20-gallon tank averaging 15 miles per gallon should show a measurable difference after an extra 8 miles of driving. They completed the diagnostic checklist: radio equipment, computer systems, GPS calibration, odometer function, fuel system. Everything tested within normal parameters except for the distance calculations that didn't add up. At 3:45 a.m., Chen was back at her dispatch console when the phone rang again. "Brewster County Sheriff, Deputy Chen." "Deputy, this is Billy again from the Roadrunner. That trucker I told you about, Joe Mendez. He just called me from San Antonio, says he's confused about something." "What's that, Billy?" "He says, when he left our place this morning, his fuel gauge was showing half empty, but when he got to San Antonio, it was reading 3/4 full, and his trip log shows 127 miles for what should be an 89-mile drive." Chen felt the familiar chill return. "Billy, did Joe mention anything else about his drive this morning?" "Yeah, said he doesn't remember passing through Junction or Fort Stockton, but his GPS log shows waypoints for both towns. And here's the really weird part. He swears he drove straight through, no stops, but his phone's location history shows him stopping for 23 minutes at a rest area that he's never heard of." Chen was taking notes as fast as she could write. "What rest area?" "Place called Desert Springs Rest Stop, mile marker 127. But deputy, I've lived in this county all my life. There's no rest area by that name anywhere on 285. The mile marker 127 reference again." Chen felt a pattern emerging, though she couldn't yet articulate what it meant. "Billy, can you have Joe send me his GPS logs and phone location history?" "I'll ask him. He's pretty shook up about all this. Says his wife thinks he's losing his mind." After Billy hung up, Chen spent the next hour cross-referencing every database she could access. State highway records, GPS mapping systems, county maintenance logs, historical surveys. Her search confirmed what Rodriguez had observed. There was no mile marker 127 on Highway 285 in Brewster County. The numbering sequence ran 124, 125, 126, then jumped to 128 at the county line. She found the explanation in a 1987 Highway Department memo. Mile marker 127 eliminated during highway realignment project. Marker removed. Numbering sequence adjusted to reflect actual measured distances. But according to multiple witnesses, people were still referencing and apparently encountering mile marker 127 37 years after it had been officially eliminated. At 4:30 a.m., Chen received Joe Mendez's GPS and phone data via email. The files were extensive, but certain details jumped out immediately. GPS route log, San Antonio to Roadrunner truck stop, 89.3 miles, ETA 1 hour 24 minutes. Actual driven, 127.7 miles. Time, 2 hours 13 minutes. Unexplained. Stop, Desert Springs Rest Area, mile marker 127. Stop duration, 23 minutes. Driver activity during stop, unknown. The phone's location history showed coordinates for the rest area. Stop, 30.2847 degrees north, 103.782 degrees west. Chen inputted these coordinates into the county GIS system and found herself looking at an empty stretch of highway between mile markers 126 and 128. The exact area where mile marker 127 should have been located before the 1987 realignment. She cross-referenced the coordinates with historical surveys and found a 1955 map showing a Desert Springs watering station at those exact coordinates. The station had been abandoned in the 1960s when the highway was first modernized, decades before the 1987 realignment that removed mile marker 127. Chen printed out the historical map and compared it to current satellite imagery. The current photos showed no structures at the coordinates, just desert scrubland and a small pull-out area that truckers sometimes used for brakes. But the historical map clearly marked a building, water tower, and paved rest area at that location. She was studying the comparison when her radio crackled with another call from Rodriguez. Dispatch 23, I'm back out on patrol and I'm seeing something odd. Go ahead, 23. I'm at mile marker 126, and I can clearly see marker 128 ahead in my headlights. But my GPS is insisting there should be a marker 127 between them. It's trying to route me to a location that, well, there's nothing there. Chen looked at her clock. 4:52 a.m. 23. Can you investigate the area between 126 and 128? Already on it. There's a pull-out area here with some old concrete foundations, mostly buried. Looks like something was built here a long time ago. Any current structures? Negative. But dispatch, there's fresh tire tracks in the pullout. Several different vehicles, looks like they stopped here recently, and there's... Rodriguez paused. There's trash in the garbage can. Garbage can. Yeah, there's a concrete pad here with a metal garbage receptacle. Looks old, but not abandoned. It's been emptied recently, and there's a historical marker sign, though it's pretty weathered. Chen felt her pulse quicken. What does the sign say? Desert Springs Rest Area, established 1955. This facility served travelers on Highway 285 until closure in 1967, maintained by Texas Department of Transportation. Chen stared at her notes. According to the historical records she'd found, the Desert Springs watering station had been abandoned in the 1960s. But the sign Rodriguez was reading indicated a rest area that operated until 1967. And if the garbage can had been recently emptied, who was maintaining it? 23. Can you check with TxDOT tomorrow about maintenance schedules for that location? Will do, but dispatch, here's what's really bothering me. I've driven past this spot hundreds of times, and I swear this is the first time I've noticed any of this stuff. The concrete pad, the garbage can, the sign, it's like they just appeared. Chen made detailed notes about the discovery, including the exact coordinates and Rodriguez observations. 2 explanations seemed plausible. Either the historical marker and garbage receptacle had been installed recently as part of some TIEX historical preservation project that hadn't been properly logged in the county database, or Rodriguez had simply never noticed these features during his previous patrols, not uncommon for objects that didn't present any law enforcement concerns. But the fresh tire tracks and recently emptied garbage can suggested active use of a facility that officially didn't exist. At 5:15 a.m., Chen's phone rang with another call from Billy Hawkins. "Deputy, I've got Joe Mendez back on the line. He remembered something else about his stop at that rest area." "Put him through, Billy." A new voice came on the line, tired and strained. "Ma'am, this is Joe Mendez. Billy said you wanted to hear about my stop this morning." "That's right, Mr. Mendez. Can you describe what you remember about the Desert Springs rest area?" "That's just it, Deputy. I don't remember stopping there at all. But my phone says I did, and when I checked my logbook just now, there's an entry in my own handwriting that I don't remember making." Chen grabbed a fresh notepad. "What does the entry say?" 05:47 a.m. Rest stop, mile marker 127. Talked to deputy about the following car. Deputy said to stay alert but continue route. No further action needed. Chen felt the room seemed to tilt slightly. "Mr. Mendez, you spoke to a deputy at the rest area." "According to my logbook, yes, ma'am. But I don't remember it. And here's the thing. I always remember talking to law enforcement. Always. It's part of my job to stay professional and document any interactions." "Can you describe what the deputy looked like?" No, ma'am. I mean, my logbook entry doesn't include a description, and I just can't recall the conversation at all. But there's one more thing." Joe's voice became quieter. "My CB radio log shows I made a transmission at 5:49 a.m., but I don't remember what I said. The digital recorder just shows 2 minutes of static." Chen was writing frantically. "Joe, have you experienced any health issues recently? Memory problems, medications that might affect recall?" "No, ma'am. I'm 34 years old, clean bill of health, no medications. I've been driving truck for 12 years and I've never had anything like this happen." After Joe hung up, Chen sat staring at her growing pile of notes and printouts. The incident was expanding beyond simple equipment malfunctions or human error. She now had multiple witnesses reporting memory gaps, time discrepancies, and encounters with locations that officially didn't exist. She decided to call her supervisor, Sergeant Martinez, despite the early hour. "Martinez. Sergeant, this is Chen at the substation. I've got a situation developing that I think you should know about." Chen spent 20 minutes walking Martinez through the entire sequence of events, from the original call about the following vehicle to Joe Mendez's mysterious rest area stop. Martinez was quiet for a long moment after she finished. "Sarah, I want you to write up a comprehensive incident report and have it on my desk by end of shift. And I want Rodriguez to photograph everything he found at that pullout area. The concrete pad, the garbage can, the sign, everything." "You think there's something significant here?" "I think we've got enough anomalies to warrant a formal investigation. Could be equipment problems, could be some kind of coordinated prank, could be something else entirely. But I've been in law enforcement for 22 years, and I've learned that when you get this many unexplained coincidences, there's usually a pattern underneath." "What kind of pattern?" "That's what we're going to find out. I'm calling in Deputy Blackwood to assist. She's got experience with unusual cases." After Martinez hung up, Chen spent the remaining hours of her shift documenting everything in meticulous detail. She printed out GPS logs, phone records, historical maps, and maintenance schedules. She created a timeline of events and a summary of all the unexplained discrepancies. At 6:30 a.m., as the sun was beginning to rise over the desert, Rodriguez returned to the station with a memory card full of photographs from the mysterious pullout area. "Got everything documented," he said, downloading the images to Chen's computer. "But, Sarah, something else happened out there." "What?" "While I was photographing the historical marker, a truck pulled into the rest area. Driver got out, used the facilities, threw some trash in the garbage can, then drove off." Chen looked up from her computer. "What facilities?" "You said there were no current structures." Rodriguez showed her one of the photographs. It clearly showed the concrete pad, the garbage receptacle, and the weathered historical marker. But behind them, partially visible in the pre-dawn darkness, was the outline of a small building. "I swear that building wasn't there when I first arrived," Rodriguez said. "But when the truck driver pulled up, he walked right over to it like he knew exactly where it was." Chen studied the photograph. The structure was definitely there, a simple rectangular building with what appeared to be restroom facilities. But in the earlier photos Rodriguez had taken, the same area showed only empty desert. "Did you talk to the truck driver?" "I tried to. But by the time I finished taking the photos and walked over, he was already back in his cab. Drove off before I could flag him down, but I got his plate number." Rodriguez showed Chen his notebook. "Texas commercial plate JH7842. Chen ran the plate through the system. The registration came back to Joe Mendez of San Antonio, Texas. But according to their previous phone conversation, Joe Mendez had been home in San Antonio for over an hour. At 7 a.m., Deputy Patricia Blackwood arrived at the substation to begin her investigation. Chen briefed her on all the events of the night, including the impossible sighting of Joe Mendez's truck at the rest area. Blackwood was a 15-year veteran known for her methodical approach to unusual cases. She listened without interruption as Chen walked through the timeline, then spent an hour reviewing all the documentation. "Sarah, I want to start by eliminating the most obvious explanations," Blackwood said finally. "Equipment failures, human error, administrative mix-ups. Most anomalous events have mundane causes if you dig deep enough. And if they don't, then we expand the investigation. But let's start with what we can verify independently." Blackwood's first step was to drive out to the rest area location with Chen, arriving at 8:15 a.m. in full daylight. They found the concrete pad, the garbage receptacle, and the historical marker exactly as Rodriguez had photographed them. But there was no building. Could Rodriguez have been seeing shadows, or misinterpreting the shapes in low light? Blackwood asked. Chen studied the area carefully. In daylight, there was clearly no structure large enough to house restroom facilities, but the concrete pad was larger than it had appeared in the photos, and there were what looked like old foundation marks in patterns consistent with a small building. Blackwood photographed the area extensively, then called the Texas Department of Transportation to inquire about the historical marker and garbage receptacle. The conversation was brief and confusing. According to TxDOT records, no historical marker had been approved for that location, and they had no maintenance contract for garbage collection at mile marker 127. But when Blackwood provided the exact coordinates, the TxDOT representative said they showed an active rest area in their database. Desert Springs Rest Area, established 1955, currently maintained. "Ma'am, our records show regular maintenance and cleaning for that facility," the TxDOT representative said. "Last garbage collection was yesterday at 6 p.m. Blackwood asked for documentation of the maintenance records to be faxed to the sheriff's department, then called the county GIS office to cross-reference the location data. The county's response was equally contradictory. Their official maps showed no rest area at those coordinates, but their historical database contained references to Desert Springs Rest Area maintenance contracts dating back to 1955 and continuing to the present day. It's like we've got two different versions of reality in our databases, Blackwood told Chen. The current operational records say there's nothing there, but the historical and maintenance databases show continuous operation. Chen showed Blackwood the overnight call logs and evidence collected so far. Together, they created a comprehensive incident file that documented all the anomalies without attempting to explain them. At 10:30 a.m., they received a callback from Joe Mendez in San Antonio. Deputy, I've been thinking about what happened last night and I found something else that doesn't make sense. What's that, Mr. Mendez? I keep detailed fuel and mileage logs for tax purposes. According to my records, I bought fuel in Brewster County last night, 20 gallons at the Roadrunner truck stop. But I never stopped for fuel there. I filled up in Junction before I started the trip. Blackwood took the phone. Mr. Mendez, this is Deputy Blackwood. Do you have a receipt for the fuel purchase? Yes, ma'am. It's right here in my logbook. Timestamp shows 11:47 p.m. yesterday. Pump number 3, 20.3 gallons of diesel. But you don't remember making that purchase? No, ma'am. And here's what's really bothering me. According to my mileage calculations, I shouldn't have needed fuel at all. I started with a full tank, and the distance to San Antonio isn't enough to require refueling. Blackwood made arrangements to have Joe's fuel receipt and logbook records sent to the sheriff's department, then called Billy Hawkins to verify the truck stop's records. Billy confirmed that their point-of-sale system showed Joe Mendez purchasing 20.3 gallons of diesel at 11:47 p.m., pump 3. The transaction had been paid with Joe's fleet fuel card, and the security camera showed him operating the pump. But Billy, Blackwood said, didn't you tell us earlier that Joe was shook up when he came in this morning, and that your security footage was missing several hours from last night? That's right, Deputy. We're missing footage from about midnight to 3 a.m. But the transaction records are intact, and we have clear video of the fuel purchase at 11:47. Blackwood requested copies of all the truck stop's records and video footage, then returned to the substation to compile her initial assessment. Sarah, we're dealing with something that's either very sophisticated or very unusual. Every piece of evidence is internally consistent, but the overall pattern doesn't make logical sense. What do you mean? Look at the timeline. Joe Mendez calls at 2:47 a.m., reporting a vehicle following him. Our dispatch logs show the call came in, but Rodriguez can't find any trace of Joe when he responds. The truck stop has video of Joe buying fuel at 11:47 p.m., but is missing footage from midnight to 3 a.m. Joe's own records show him stopping at a rest area that doesn't exist and talking to a deputy who wasn't there. Chen studied the evidence board they'd created, showing the timeline and all the documented anomalies, and Rodriguez photographs Joe's truck at the rest area this morning, hours after Joe says he was already home in San Antonio. Exactly. Each individual piece of evidence makes sense on its own, but when you put them together, they create logical impossibilities. Blackwood called Sergeant Martinez to request additional resources for the investigation. Within an hour, Detective Ray Sullivan from the county's Criminal Investigation Division arrived to review the case. Sullivan was a skeptical investigator known for his ability to find rational explanations for seemingly inexplicable events. He spent 2 hours reviewing all the evidence and conducting follow-up interviews with the witnesses. Patricia, Sarah, I think we're looking at a combination of factors, Sullivan concluded. Equipment malfunctions, human error, administrative database corruption, and possibly some kind of coordinated hoax. What about the physical evidence? Chen asked. The rest area that exists in some databases but not others. The mile marker that was eliminated in 1987 but people keep referencing. The mile marker issue is simple. Outdated GPS databases. A lot of truckers use older GPS units or phone apps that haven't been updated with current highway information. As for the rest area, I suspect we've got database synchronization problems between different agencies. It happens more often than you'd think. Blackwood wasn't convinced. Ray, how do you explain Joe Mendez's truck being photographed at the rest area, hours after he was already home? Misidentification. Similar truck, same license plate number sequence. Rodriguez was tired, working in low-light conditions. Easy mistake to make. Sullivan's explanations were plausible, but Chen noticed that each one required accepting multiple unlikely coincidences. Database corruption, equipment failure, human error, and misidentification all occurring in the same incident seemed statistically improbable. At 2 p.m., they received the TXDOT maintenance records that Blackwood had requested. The documents showed regular garbage collection and facility maintenance at Desert Springs Rest Area from 1955 to the present day, with detailed logs of services performed and materials used. But when Sullivan called TxDOT to verify the records, he was told that no such maintenance contract existed, and that no facility by that name was in their current operational database. Someone's playing games with the paperwork, Sullivan concluded. Probably a disgruntled employee or someone trying to make the department look incompetent. Chen was becoming increasingly uncomfortable with Sullivan's dismissive approach. While his explanations were individually plausible, the cumulative effect of so many simultaneous anomalies seemed to warrant more serious consideration. At 3:30 p.m., she received a call that changed her perspective on the entire investigation. Brewster County Sheriff, Deputy Chen. Deputy, this is Captain Williams from the Texas Department of Public Safety. I understand you've been investigating some unusual incidents involving Highway 285 and mile marker 127. Chen felt her pulse quicken. Yes, sir, that's correct. Deputy, I need to schedule a meeting with you and your investigating team. We've been tracking similar incidents across several counties, and your case appears to be related to a larger pattern we're investigating. What kind of pattern, Captain? I'd rather discuss this in person. Can you meet with me and Agent Foster from our Special Investigations Unit tomorrow at 10 a.m.? Chen looked at Blackwood, who was listening to the conversation. Both deputies nodded. Yes, sir. We'll be there. One more thing, Deputy. Until we meet, I need you to secure all evidence related to this case and refrain from discussing the details with anyone outside your immediate investigation team. This is now part of an ongoing state investigation. After Williams hung up, Chen and Blackwood spent the rest of their shift documenting everything they'd discovered and securing all evidence in the department's locked storage facility. Sarah, what do you think DPS wants with our case? Blackwood asked as they completed the evidence inventory. I don't know, but Captain Williams sounded like he knew exactly what we'd been dealing with. Like this wasn't the first time he'd heard about these kinds of anomalies. Chen locked the last evidence box and sealed it with departmental tape. Tomorrow's meeting would either provide rational explanations for everything they'd experienced, or open up possibilities she wasn't sure she was prepared to consider. As she prepared to leave the station at the end of her extended shift, Chen noticed something that made her stop and double-check her paperwork. The incident report she'd filed that morning showed the original call coming in at 2:47 a.m. on Tuesday, October 15th. But according to her watch, today was Wednesday, October 16th, meaning the incident had occurred yesterday. She checked the dispatch computer, the wall calendar, and her phone. All showed Wednesday, October 16th. But her incident report timestamp clearly showed Tuesday, October 15th, tomorrow's date. Chen stared at the discrepancy for several minutes, then made one final entry in the case file. Evidence Log Addendum. Time-date discrepancies extend to official documentation. Original incident report shows future date despite being filed in real time. Recommend chronology verification as part of ongoing investigation. She sealed the addendum in an evidence envelope and locked it with the rest of the case materials, then drove home through the desert dawn with more questions than answers. The meeting with Captain Williams and Agent Foster was scheduled for the next morning, but Chen found herself unable to sleep. She kept thinking about the pattern of anomalies, time discrepancies, missing locations, memory gaps, documentation that contradicted itself. Each individual incident could be explained away, but taken together, they suggested something far more complex than equipment failure or human error. At 9:45 a.m. the following morning, Chen and Blackwood arrived at the DPS field office in Alpine. Captain Williams was a serious man in his 50s, with graying hair and the demeanor of someone who had seen things that challenged his understanding of the world. Agent Foster was younger, perhaps 40, with sharp eyes and a thick folder of documents. "Deputies, thank you for coming. Please, have a seat," Williams said, gesturing to chairs around a conference table. "What I'm about to share with you is classified as part of an ongoing investigation, so I need your agreement that this information won't leave this room." Both deputies nodded. "Agent Foster, would you brief them on Project Waypoint?" Foster opened his folder and extracted several photographs and documents. "Deputies, over the past 18 months, we've documented 47 incidents across West Texas involving temporal and spatial anomalies along rural highways. Missing mile markers, phantom rest stops, time discrepancies, memory gaps, all following patterns similar to what you've experienced." Chen felt a mixture of validation and apprehension. "So, we're not the first?" "Far from it. The incidents cluster around specific highway segments, usually in remote areas with minimal traffic. Highway 285 in your county has generated 12 separate reports, making it one of our most active locations." Foster showed them a map of West Texas with red pins marking incident locations. The pattern was unmistakable. Clusters of pins along remote highway corridors, with Highway 285 showing a particularly dense concentration. "What's causing it?" Blackwood asked. Williams leaned forward. "That's what we're trying to determine. The incidents appear to be connected to historical transportation routes, old wagon trails, stage routes, railroad corridors that were later converted to highways. Many of the anomalies center on locations where infrastructure was built, abandoned, then rebuilt on the same sites." "Like Desert Springs Rest Area?" Chen said. "Exactly. We've found that most of the phantom locations that people report actually did exist at some point in history. Desert Springs, for example, was a genuine watering station in the 1950s and early 1960s. It was officially closed in 1967, but our research suggests some kind of unofficial maintenance continued for years afterward." Foster showed them historical photographs of Desert Springs Rest Area. The images matched Rodriguez's description of the building he'd seen in the pre-dawn darkness. A simple, rectangular structure with restroom facilities and a covered picnic area. "The building Rodriguez photographed," Williams continued, "matches these 1965 photos exactly, but according to current surveys, no structure has existed at that location since 1972. Chen studied the photographs, comparing them to Rodriguez's digital images from 2 days earlier. The architectural details were identical: the roofline, the door placement, even the style of the concrete picnic tables. "How is that possible?" she asked. "We have several working theories," Foster said. "One possibility is that some of these facilities were never completely abandoned. Off-the-books maintenance, unofficial use by local communities, that sort of thing. Over decades, the paperwork gets lost or corrupted, but the physical infrastructure remains. What about the time discrepancies and memory gaps? Williams and Foster exchanged a look that Chen couldn't interpret. That's where the investigation gets more complicated, Williams said carefully. We're working with researchers from UT Austin's physics department and the National Institute of Standards and Technology to explore some unconventional possibilities. What kind of possibilities? Foster hesitated before answering. Deputy, what do you know about temporal mechanics and gravitational field anomalies? Jen felt the conversation moving into territory she wasn't prepared for. Nothing beyond basic physics. The researchers have identified several locations along these highway corridors where gravitational measurements show slight but consistent anomalies. Areas where GPS satellites lose precision, where atomic clocks drift, where electromagnetic fields behave unpredictably. Blackwood leaned back in her chair. You're talking about what? Time distortion? We're talking about areas where the normal flow of time and space appears to be disrupted in small but measurable ways, Williams said. Nothing dramatic. We're talking about variations of seconds or minutes, not hours or days, but enough to cause the kind of anomalies you've been documenting. Chen thought about Joe Mendez's missing 23 minutes, Rodriguez's impossible mile readings, the time discrepancies between different clocks and systems. Is this natural or artificial? That's the key question, Foster said. Some of the locations show evidence of historical electromagnetic experiments, military research projects from the 1940s and 1950s, early radar installations, communications testing. It's possible that some kind of residual effect from those activities is interacting with the local geology to create these anomalies. Williams showed them geological surveys of the Highway 285 corridor. This area sits on a complex intersection of fault lines, underground water systems, and mineral deposits that could amplify electromagnetic effects. Add decades of low-level electromagnetic pollution from radio towers, power lines, and military installations, and you might get the kind of field interactions that could affect time measurement and spatial perception. Chen studied the geological maps, noting the concentration of fault lines around the Desert Springs area. So, the anomalies are real, but they have natural causes. That's our working hypothesis, Foster said. But we're still gathering data. The incidents you've documented provide some of the most detailed evidence we've collected so far. Williams pulled out additional photographs showing other phantom locations across West Texas. Rest stops, truck way stations, historical markers that appeared and disappeared according to witness reports. The pattern suggests that these anomalies interact with human perception and memory in specific ways, he continued. People experience events that are internally consistent but don't match external records. They make rational decisions based on information that seems reliable at the time, but creates contradictions when examined later. Like Joe Mendez stopping for fuel he didn't need at a place he doesn't remember, Blackwood said. Exactly. His actions made sense based on his perceptions at the time. His fuel gauge probably did show empty. The rest area probably did appear to be a legitimate facility. But the underlying reality was different from what he experienced. Foster showed them preliminary scientific data, electromagnetic field measurements, gravitational anomaly readings, atmospheric analysis from the affected areas. The researchers are calling it localized chronospatial displacement, areas where the normal relationship between time, space, and human perception becomes unreliable. Not science fiction, just unusual physics interacting with complex geography and decades of electromagnetic pollution. Chen found the scientific explanation both reassuring and unsettling. It provided a rational framework for understanding the anomalies without resorting to paranormal explanations, but it also suggested that reality itself was less stable than she'd assumed. "What happens now?" she asked. "We're expanding the investigation," Williams said. "We want to install monitoring equipment at several locations along Highway 285, including the Desert Springs coordinates. Continuous measurement of electromagnetic fields, gravitational variations, and atmospheric conditions. If our theory is correct, we should be able to predict when and where these anomalies are most likely to occur. And if the theory is wrong?" Williams was quiet for a moment. "Then we'll have to consider other possibilities." The meeting concluded with arrangements for DPS to establish a monitoring station near the Desert Springs location. Chen and Blackwood would continue their normal patrol duties, but were asked to document any additional anomalies they encountered, no matter how minor. Driving back to the substation, Chen felt a mixture of relief and uncertainty. The DPS investigation provided a framework for understanding what they'd experienced, but it also raised new questions about the nature of reality in their patrol area. "Patricia, do you buy their explanation?" she asked as they passed a mile marker 128. "It makes more sense than anything else I can think of," Blackwood replied. "But I keep thinking about Rodriguez seeing that building in the darkness. If it was just a perception anomaly, why did it look exactly like the historical photographs? How did his brain know what a 1960s rest area building should look like?" Chen didn't have an answer for that question, and it bothered her for the rest of the drive back to the station. Over the following weeks, DPS installed monitoring equipment at 3 locations along Highway 285, including the Desert Springs coordinates. The devices measured electromagnetic fields, gravitational variations, atmospheric pressure, and temporal stability using atomic clock synchronization. Chen's patrol schedule included regular checks on the monitoring stations, and she began to notice patterns in the data. The equipment showed consistent anomalies during specific weather conditions, particularly on clear nights with low humidity and minimal wind. The gravitational measurements varied by tiny amounts, but those variations correlated with reports of phantom sightings and time discrepancies. On November 3rd, exactly 3 weeks after the original incident, Chen was monitoring the equipment when she noticed unusual readings across all parameters. Electromagnetic fields were fluctuating outside normal ranges. Gravitational measurements were showing the largest variations recorded so far, and the atomic clock synchronization was drifting. She radioed Rodriguez, who was patrolling the eastern sector. 23. Can you respond to the Desert Springs monitoring station? I'm seeing anomalous readings and want to verify equipment function. Copy, dispatch, ETA 10 minutes. Chen watched the monitoring displays as the readings continued to fluctuate. At 2:41 a.m., the electromagnetic field measurements spiked beyond the equipment's normal range, and the atomic clock system lost synchronization entirely for 37 seconds. Rodriguez's voice came over the radio at 2:43 a.m. Dispatch, I'm at the monitoring station. The equipment appears to be functioning normally, but there's something else here. What do you mean, 23? The rest area building is visible again. Same structure as before, but this time there are lights on inside and 2 vehicles parked outside. Chen felt her pulse quicken. The monitoring equipment was recording the exact kind of anomalies DPS had predicted would correlate with phantom sightings. 23, can you approach the vehicles and attempt contact? Roger. Approaching now. Chen monitored the equipment readings while waiting for Rodriguez's report. The electromagnetic anomalies continued for another 6 minutes before gradually returning to normal ranges. Rodriguez's voice came back over the radio at 2:51 a.m. Dispatch, this is complicated. I approached the building and could see people inside through the windows. 2 truckers having coffee appeared to be normal travelers using the facility. But when I knocked on the door and identified myself as law enforcement, they acted like they couldn't see or hear me. "Did you attempt to enter the building?" I tried, but the door wouldn't open. Not locked, it was like pushing against solid rock. And when I walked around to the windows, I could still see the people inside, but they didn't respond to my flashlight or attempts to get their attention. Jen made detailed notes while monitoring the equipment displays. 23, are the vehicles still there? That's the strangest part, dispatch. From one angle, I can see 2 trucks parked clearly outside the building. But if I move about 10 feet to either side, the parking area appears empty. It's like there's a specific viewpoint where the scene is visible. Can you document everything with photographs? Already on it, but I'm not sure the cameras are picking up what I'm seeing with my eyes. Chen checked the monitoring equipment one more time. All readings had returned to normal ranges, and the atomic clock synchronization was stable. At 2:55 a.m., Rodriguez reported that the building had vanished. The parking area was empty, the lights were gone, and only the familiar concrete pad and historical marker remained. 23 returned to station for debriefing. Rodriguez arrived at the substation 30 minutes later with his camera and detailed written observations. The photographs showed the concrete pad and historical marker clearly, but no building and no vehicles. However, one image captured something unusual. A faint geometric outline in the desert sand that matched the footprint of the building Rodriguez had described. Chen called Captain Williams to report the incident and transmitted copies of the monitoring data. Within 2 hours, a DPS technical team arrived to analyze the equipment and collect additional measurements from the site. Deputy Chen, this is exactly what we were hoping to capture, Agent Foster said after reviewing the data. Quantifiable measurements that correlate directly with witness observations. The electromagnetic spikes you recorded match theoretical predictions for localized chronospatial displacement events. So, Rodriguez really did see the building? He saw something. Whether it was a genuine temporal echo of the historical rest area, or a perception anomaly caused by the electromagnetic field disruption, we can't say definitively. But the fact that his observations correlate precisely with our instrument readings suggests the phenomena are real and measurable. Foster showed Chen the technical analysis of the monitoring data. The electromagnetic spikes followed patterns consistent with what physicists called quantum field fluctuations, brief disruptions in the fundamental forces that govern space and time. Think of it like a stone thrown into a still pond, Foster explained. The ripples spread out from the impact point and eventually fade away. These locations seem to be impact points where some kind of historical event created lasting disruptions in the local space-time field. What kind of historical event could do that? We're still investigating, but we found correlations with sites of intense electromagnetic activity, early radar installations, radio telescope arrays, military communications experiments. Desert Springs was used as a relay station for military communications in the 1950s, during the early days of electronic warfare research. Chen studied the historical records Foster provided. From 1952 to 1959, Desert Springs Rest Area had hosted a classified military communications project codenamed Operation Waypoint. The project involved testing high-powered radio transmission equipment and early computer networking systems. The electromagnetic fields generated by that equipment were orders of magnitude stronger than anything we use today, Foster continued. If our theory is correct, those experiments may have created permanent alterations in the local space-time field that continue to generate anomalies decades later. Chen found herself accepting the scientific explanation. but she still struggled with the implications. If remote areas of West Texas contained zones where time and space behaved unpredictably, what did that mean for law enforcement, emergency response, and public safety? Captain Williams, are there any safety protocols we should follow when these anomalies occur? Based on our research so far, the phenomena appear to be harmless to human health, Williams replied. People experience temporary confusion and memory gaps, but no lasting physical effects. The main risk is operational. Emergency responders might have difficulty locating people or coordinating activities in affected areas. Over the following months, Chen and her colleagues adapted their patrol procedures to account for the anomalies. They established protocols for verifying coordinates using multiple GPS systems, cross-referencing timestamps between different equipment, and documenting any unusual observations in standardized formats. The DPS investigation continued to gather data from multiple locations across West Texas. The pattern that emerged was consistent with Foster's electromagnetic disruption theory. Zones of chronospatial instability centered on sites of historical military communications experiments. By spring 2025, the research team had developed prediction models that could forecast when and where anomalies were most likely to occur. The models incorporated weather data, solar activity measurements, and electromagnetic field monitoring to identify high-probability time windows. Chen found the predictions remarkably accurate. On nights when the models indicated high anomaly probability, patrol units regularly encountered phantom locations, time discrepancies, and unusual electromagnetic readings. The investigation also provided practical benefits for law enforcement. Understanding the patterns helped explain several cold cases involving missing persons and unexplained vehicle accidents in remote areas. People who had vanished along certain highway corridors were often found days later in locations that didn't match their intended routes, with no memory of how they had gotten there. It's like these areas create temporary maze, Chen explained to a group of new deputies during a training session. People drive into an anomaly zone and experience a version of reality that doesn't match the outside world. They make rational navigation decisions based on road signs and landmarks that appear legitimate, but they end up in unexpected locations. The training emphasized practical response protocols, how to verify coordinates during anomalous conditions, how to maintain communication when equipment became unreliable, how to assist disoriented travelers without dismissing their experiences. Chen's final report on the Desert Springs investigation was filed in June 2025, 9 months after the original incident. The report documented 43 separate anomalous events recorded at monitoring stations along Highway 285, with electromagnetic correlations confirmed in 39 cases. The conclusion was carefully worded to acknowledge both the scientific findings and the remaining uncertainties. Analysis indicates that localized electromagnetic field anomalies in the Highway 285 corridor create measurable disruptions in temporal and spatial perception. These disruptions appear to be connected to historical military communications activities and are amplified by specific geological and atmospheric conditions. While the underlying physics remain incompletely understood, the phenomena follow predictable patterns that allow for effective law enforcement response and public safety management. Chen kept copies of all the evidence and documentation in her personal files, but the official case was closed and transferred to DPS for ongoing research. The monitoring equipment remained in place, and patrol units continued to document anomalies as part of routine operations. On quiet nights during her shift, Chen sometimes drove past the Desert Springs coordinates and checked the monitoring displays. The electromagnetic readings continued to show periodic fluctuations, and other deputies occasionally reported brief sightings of the Phantom Rest area. But Chen never saw the building herself, and she found herself uncertain whether she was disappointed or relieved by that fact. The scientific explanation provided a rational framework for understanding what had happened, but it also left room for possibilities that challenged her assumptions about the nature of reality. The incident had taught her that even in the most remote and seemingly empty places, the past could intrude on the present in ways that defied easy explanation. Whether those intrusions were electromagnetic echoes, quantum field fluctuations, or something else entirely, they served as reminders that the world contained mysteries that science was only beginning to understand. As she completed her final log entry on the case, Chen reflected on how the investigation had changed her approach to law enforcement. She had learned to document anomalies without trying to explain them away, to trust her observations while remaining open to multiple interpretations, and to accept that some questions might not have definitive answers. The desert kept its secrets, but it had also revealed that those secrets followed patterns that could be studied, measured, and understood, even if that understanding challenged conventional assumptions about time, space, and the reliability of human perception. The courthouse basement smelled of old paper and disinfectant, a sterile mustiness that Deputy Marcus Rodriguez had grown accustomed to during his 3 months managing the evidence room. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as he conducted his weekly inventory, clipboard in hand, methodically checking each sealed bag and box against the computer database. It was tedious work, but Rodriguez appreciated the quiet precision required. Every item documented, every chain of custody form properly filed, every seal intact and verified. The discrepancy appeared on a Tuesday morning in November, buried in routine paperwork that should have been straightforward. Case file number 2024-11-BR-0847. A domestic violence arrest from the previous week involving Dale Kramer, age 34, charged with assault and destruction of property. The arresting officer, Deputy Williams, had booked 3 items into evidence: Kramer's damaged cell phone, a broken picture frame, and a kitchen knife with a 4-inch blade. Rodriguez pulled the physical evidence boxes and began his comparison. The cell phone was there, sealed in bag EV-0847-A, properly labeled with date, time, and officer initials. The picture frame fragments were in bag EV-0847-B, each piece wrapped separately and documented with photographs. But bag EV-0847-C, which should have contained the kitchen knife, held something entirely different. Inside the sealed evidence bag, labeled clearly with Deputy Williams' handwriting and bearing an intact evidence seal, was a child's toy truck. A red metal fire engine, perhaps 6 inches long, with working wheels and an extending ladder. The toy showed signs of age and wear, with scratched paint and a small dent in the front bumper, but it was clearly a child's plaything, not a weapon. Rodriguez checked the evidence seal carefully. It was unbroken, bearing Williams' signature and the correct date and timestamps. The bag number matched the database entry exactly, but the contents made no sense in the context of the case. He pulled up the arrest report on his computer and read through Williams' account of the incident. Dale Kramer had allegedly threatened his girlfriend with a kitchen knife during an argument, then thrown the knife at the wall, embedding it in the drywall. Williams had photographed the knife in situ before removing it and booking it as evidence. The photographs were clear and detailed, showing a standard kitchen knife with a black plastic handle and a 4-inch stainless steel blade. Rodriguez compared the photographs to the toy truck in the evidence bag. There was no possible way they could be the same item, yet the chain of custody documentation was flawless. He called Deputy Williams at home. The senior deputy was off duty until Thursday. Williams, Dave, this is Marcus Rodriguez at the courthouse. I've got a question about evidence from your domestic case last week, the Kramer arrest. Sure, what do you need? I'm looking at the knife you booked, and there seems to be some kind of mix-up. The evidence bag contains a toy truck instead of the weapon. A long pause. Marcus, that's impossible. I personally sealed that knife in the evidence bag immediately after photographing it. The seal hasn't been tampered with? Completely intact, your signature, correct date and time, proper evidence number. But it definitely contains a toy fire truck. A what? Rodriguez described the toy in detail, noting its condition and apparent age. Williams listened without interruption. Marcus, I've been booking evidence for 12 years. I know the difference between a kitchen knife and a toy truck. Something's wrong with your inventory system. Dave, can you come in and take a look? I'd like to verify this with you present before I write up a discrepancy report. Williams agreed to come in within the hour. Rodriguez spent the intervening time double-checking his procedures and examining the evidence bag under magnification. The seal was definitely authentic. It showed the characteristic tamper-evident features that would be impossible to replicate without specialized equipment. Williams's signature matched samples in his personnel file. The date and timestamps corresponded exactly to the arrest report. But the toy truck remained stubbornly present where a kitchen knife should have been. Williams arrived at 11:15 a.m. and examined the evidence bag himself. Rodriguez watched the deputy's face change from confidence to confusion, to something approaching alarm. Marcus, this is my handwriting, my signature, my evidence seal. But I have never seen that toy truck before in my life. Could there have been a mix-up in the booking process? Maybe you accidentally grabbed the wrong evidence bag. Williams shook his head firmly. I had 3 items from that scene. The phone was in my left cargo pocket. The picture frame pieces were in a separate bag in my right pocket, and I carried the knife separately to avoid cross-contamination. I sealed each item individually in the evidence room, one at a time, with proper documentation. Rodriguez pulled out Williams' arrest photos and compared them side by side with the toy truck. The knife in the photographs was clearly visible, embedded in the drywall, with measurements and evidence markers providing scale reference. Dave, walk me through exactly what happened when you booked the knife. Williams consulted his duty notebook, flipping to the entries from the previous week. I arrived at the scene at 9:47 p.m., took statements from both parties, photographed the knife in the wall, removed the knife at 10:23 p.m. using evidence gloves, placed it in a temporary evidence container, transported all evidence to the courthouse, arrived here at 11:05 p.m., booked the phone first, then the picture frame, then the knife last. Do you remember anything unusual about the booking process? No, everything was routine. I sealed the knife in bag EV-0847-C at 11:18 p.m. according to my log. Signed the seal, dated it, entered it in the computer system. Standard procedure. Rodriguez checked the computer logs. Williams' entries showed all 3 items booked within a 15-minute window, with proper documentation and digital photographs of each sealed evidence bag. Dave, let me show you something else. Rodriguez pulled up the digital photos from the booking process on his computer. The images showed Williams sealing 3 evidence bags, including a clear photograph of bag EV-0847-C, being sealed with what appeared to be a kitchen knife inside. But when Rodriguez zoomed in on the digital image, the object in the bag looked distinctly different from a knife. It was difficult to make out details through the plastic evidence bag in the photograph, but the shape seemed more consistent with a small vehicle than a bladed weapon. Williams stared at the computer screen, his face pale. Marcus, I swear to you, I sealed a kitchen knife in that bag. I held it in my hands. I photographed it. I documented it. But looking at this booking photo now, I can't tell what that object actually is. Rodriguez printed out the booking photograph and examined it under magnification. The image quality was sufficient to show that an object had been sealed in the bag, but the specific details were unclear due to the plastic distortion and lighting conditions. Dave, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Is it possible that you experienced any kind of confusion or disorientation during the arrest or booking process? Any medication, fatigue, stress factors that might have affected your perception? Williams was quiet for several minutes, considering the question seriously. I was tired. It had been a long shift, but I wasn't impaired or confused. The arrest was straightforward, the suspect was cooperative, and I followed standard procedures throughout. Rodriguez made detailed notes about the discrepancy and began preparing a formal incident report. Protocol required him to notify Sergeant Martinez immediately and secure all related evidence pending investigation. Before calling Martinez, Rodriguez decided to conduct one additional verification. He contacted the victim in the domestic violence case, asking her to confirm details about the weapon involved in the incident. Ma'am, this is Deputy Rodriguez with the Brewster County Sheriff's Department. I'm following up on the incident report from last week involving Dale Kramer. I need to verify some details about the evidence collected. Of course, officer. Is there a problem? Can you describe the knife that was involved in the incident? The victim's description matched Williams' report exactly. A kitchen knife with a black plastic handle and a 4-inch blade, taken from her kitchen drawer. She confirmed that Williams had photographed it embedded in the wall and had removed it as evidence. Ma'am, I have one more question. Do you or Mr. Kramer have any children? No, neither of us has kids. Why do you ask? Do you recall seeing any children's toys in the apartment during the incident? No, definitely not. We don't have any toys or anything like that. Rodriguez thanked her and ended the call, then immediately contacted Sergeant Martinez. Martinez arrived at the courthouse within 30 minutes, bringing Deputy Blackwood to assist with the investigation. Together, they examined the evidence bag, the documentation, and Williams' account of the incident. Marcus, this is either a serious breach of evidence security or something very unusual, Martinez said after reviewing all the materials. I want a complete audit of the evidence room, focusing on any items booked in the past 2 weeks. The audit took 4 hours and revealed 2 additional discrepancies. Case number 2024-11-BR-0832, a burglary investigation, showed a missing laptop computer that had been replaced by a stack of children's books. Case number 2024-11-BR-0855, a drug possession arrest, contained a bag of what appeared to be children's candy instead of the methamphetamine that had been documented. All 3 cases showed the same pattern, intact evidence seals with proper signatures and documentation, but contents that didn't match the original items. And in each case, the substitute items appeared to be children's toys, books, or candy. Patricia, I want you to interview the officers who made these arrests, Martinez instructed. Get detailed statements about their booking procedures and any unusual observations. Blackwood's interviews revealed that all 3 deputies, Williams, Chen, and Rodriguez himself, had clear memories of booking the correct evidence items. None reported any confusion, disorientation, or procedural deviations. All insisted that their evidence seals were authentic and unbroken. But the physical evidence told a different story. Martinez called Captain Williams at DPS to discuss the situation. Given the recent investigation into spatial anomalies in the county, he wanted to determine if there might be a connection between the evidence room discrepancies and the chronospatial disturbances documented along Highway 285. Captain, we've got what appears to be impossible evidence substitutions in our courthouse evidence room. 3 separate cases, all involving children's items replacing adult evidence, all with intact evidence seals and proper documentation. Williams agreed to send Agent Foster to investigate, bringing electromagnetic monitoring equipment to test for any unusual field activity in the courthouse basement. Foster arrived that evening with a portable version of the monitoring equipment used at the Highway 285 sites. He spent 2 hours taking baseline measurements throughout the evidence room, documenting electromagnetic fields, gravitational variations, and temporal stability. Sergeant Martinez, I'm reading some interesting anomalies down here, Foster said, studying his instrument displays. Nothing as dramatic as what we've measured on Highway 285, but definitely outside normal parameters. What kind of anomalies? Low-level electromagnetic fluctuations, particularly around the evidence storage area, and there's something unusual about the gravitational readings near the vault. Foster showed Martinez the data readouts. The electromagnetic fields in the evidence room showed patterns similar to those recorded during chronospatial events, but at much lower intensities. Could these fluctuations be affecting the evidence somehow? It's possible. If the courthouse is experiencing minor chronospatial disturbances, it could create localized reality displacement events. Areas where the normal relationship between objects and their documented properties becomes unreliable. Martinez found himself struggling with concepts that challenged his fundamental understanding of evidence handling and law enforcement procedures. Agent Foster, are you telling me that our evidence room exists in some kind of altered reality zone? I'm saying that the electromagnetic environment in this building shows characteristics consistent with the spatial anomalies we've documented elsewhere in the county. It's possible that evidence items are being subjected to the same kind of displacement effects that create phantom locations and time discrepancies. Foster recommended installing continuous monitoring equipment in the evidence room and establishing new protocols for evidence verification and documentation. Over the following week, the monitoring equipment recorded several minor electromagnetic spikes that correlated with additional evidence discrepancies. A handgun from an assault case was replaced by a wooden toy pistol. Stolen jewelry became a collection of plastic costume accessories. Drug paraphernalia transformed into children's art supplies. The pattern was consistent. Adult evidence items, particularly those associated with violence or illegal activity, were being replaced by innocent children's items. The substitutions maintained rough equivalences in size and function, but changed the fundamental nature of the objects. It's like some kind of reality filter, Rodriguez observed during one of the daily monitoring sessions. Something that takes harmful objects and converts them into harmless alternatives. Blackwood had been researching the history of the courthouse building and discovered information that supported Foster's electromagnetic theory. The courthouse was built in 1952 on the site of a former military communications facility, she reported to Martinez. The basement foundations incorporate concrete and steel from the original military installation, which was part of the same Operation Waypoint project that affected the Desert Springs area. The historical records showed that the courthouse basement had housed radio equipment and early computer systems during the 1950s, generating intense electromagnetic fields for several years before the military operation was discontinued. So we're dealing with the same underlying phenomenon that creates the highway anomalies, Martinez concluded. Residual electromagnetic effects from historical military activities, amplified by the building's construction materials. Foster confirmed this assessment after comparing the courthouse readings with data from other affected sites. The electromagnetic signatures were consistent with those measured at locations experiencing chronospatial disturbances. The difference is that the courthouse anomalies seem to be influenced by the specific function of the building, Foster explained. Rather than creating phantom locations or time discrepancies, the disturbances are interacting with the law enforcement context to produce selective object substitutions. Why children's items specifically? That's unclear. It could be related to the psychological associations of the space, a place where evidence of crimes and violence is stored. The anomalies might be responding to some kind of collective unconscious desire to transform harmful objects into innocent ones. Martinez found the psychological explanation unsatisfying, but couldn't argue with the documented pattern. Every substituted item maintained the same general function and appearance as the original evidence, but represented a harmless alternative. The investigation team developed new protocols for evidence handling that accounted for the possibility of anomalous substitutions. All evidence items were photographed immediately upon booking, with multiple angles and detailed close-ups. High-value or critical evidence was stored in specially shielded containers designed to minimize electromagnetic exposure. The monitoring equipment remained in place, providing continuous data about electromagnetic conditions in the evidence room. Deputies learned to recognize the early warning signs of anomalous activity: fluctuating electromagnetic readings, slight temperature variations, and subtle changes in the ambient sound levels. Most importantly, they established verification procedures that didn't rely solely on physical evidence. Audio recordings of witness statements, digital copies of photographs, and detailed written descriptions were maintained as backup documentation for all cases. The evidence room discrepancies continued to occur sporadically, but the new protocols allowed the department to maintain case integrity despite the substitutions. Defense attorneys occasionally challenged evidence authenticity, but the comprehensive documentation and expert testimony about electromagnetic anomalies provided sufficient legal foundation for prosecutions. Rodriguez adapted to managing an evidence room where reality was occasionally unreliable. He developed an intuitive sense for when anomalous conditions were developing, and learned to time his inventory procedures to avoid periods of high electromagnetic activity. It's like working in a place where the laws of physics are mostly reliable, he explained to a visiting investigator from another county. Most of the time, everything works exactly as expected, but occasionally you have to account for factors that aren't covered in standard evidence handling manuals. The courthouse basement became a research site for ongoing studies into practical applications of chronospatial anomaly management. Universities sent graduate students to study evidence preservation techniques under anomalous conditions. Other law enforcement agencies consulted with Brewster County about developing protocols for similar situations. Rodriguez's final report on the evidence room investigation was filed in December 2024, documenting 47 confirmed anomalous substitutions over a 6-week period. The report established procedures that became a model for other agencies dealing with electromagnetic-related evidence integrity issues. Analysis demonstrates that controlled electromagnetic environments can successfully maintain evidence integrity despite periodic anomalous object substitutions. While the underlying physics remain incompletely understood, practical management protocols allow for continued law enforcement operations within affected facilities. The key finding is that anomalous events follow predictable patterns that can be anticipated and accommodated through appropriate documentation and verification procedures. Rodriguez concluded his evidence room assignment in January 2025, transitioning back to patrol duties with a unique appreciation for the complex relationship between physical evidence and documented reality. His experience managing evidence under anomalous conditions had taught him that truth could be more complicated than simple physical verification suggested. The monitoring equipment remained operational, and the evidence room continued to function effectively despite its unusual electromagnetic environment. New deputies assigned to evidence management received specialized training in anomaly recognition and documentation procedures. On his last day in the courthouse basement, Rodriguez conducted a final inventory check, methodically verifying each item against the database records. Everything matched exactly, until he reached the last box on the shelf. Inside evidence bag EV 2024-12, BR 0901, which should have contained a crowbar from a recent burglary case, was a child's toy hammer made of bright yellow plastic. The evidence seal was intact, the documentation was perfect, and Rodriguez's own handwriting confirmed that he had personally booked the crowbar just 3 days earlier. He documented the discrepancy according to established protocols, photographed the substitute item, and updated the case file with appropriate notations. Then he sealed the box, filed the paperwork, and walked out of the evidence room for the final time. The night shift dispatch console at Brewster County Sheriff's Department hummed with electronic efficiency, banks of monitors displaying GPS coordinates, unit statuses, and communication logs in real time. Dispatcher Kelly Vasquez had worked the midnight to 8 rotation for 6 years, long enough to develop an almost intuitive sense for the rhythm of rural law enforcement. The predictable ebb and flow of emergency calls, routine check-ins, and the occasional crisis that shattered the desert quiet. But on Thursday morning, December 12, 2024, that familiar rhythm began to fracture in ways that challenged her understanding of linear time itself. The first anomaly appeared at 3:17 a.m., buried in what should have been routine call log data. Vasquez was reviewing overnight incident reports when she noticed a discrepancy in the automatic timestamp system. Call number 2024-12-BR-1247 showed an initial contact time of 3:17 a.m., but the subsequent log entries displayed timestamps that moved backward through time. Response dispatch at 3:14 a.m., unit acknowledgement at 3:11 a.m., and arrival on scene at 3:09 a.m. Vasquez stared at the screen for several seconds, certain she had misread the data. She refreshed the display, checked the system clock, and verified that her computer's internal chronometer matched the master dispatch clock on the wall. All timepieces showed 3:22 a.m., but the call log continued to display impossible temporal sequences. She pulled up the audio recordings associated with the incident. Call number 1247 involved a welfare check request for an elderly resident on County Road 2847, approximately 18 miles southeast of the courthouse. The initial call had come from the subject's daughter in San Antonio, concerned because her father hadn't answered his phone for 2 days. Vasquez listened to the recording of her own voice. Unit 12. Respond to 479. 1 County Road 2847 for a welfare check. Complainant reports subject hasn't been reachable for 48 hours. Deputy Sarah Chen's response was clear and professional. Copy, dispatch. En route to County Road 2847. ETA approximately 25 minutes. The timestamps on these recordings match the impossible sequence in the computer log. Vasquez's dispatch at 3:17 a.m., followed by Chen's response logged at 3:14 a.m., 3 minutes earlier than the original call. Vasquez immediately radioed Chen, who was currently en route to the welfare check location. Unit 12, this is dispatch. Can you confirm your current status and location? Chen's voice came back through the radio with slight static. Dispatch Unit 12. Currently on County Road 2847, approximately 2 miles from the residence. ETA about 5 minutes. Vasquez checked her console display. According to the GPS tracking system, Chen's patrol unit was indeed approaching the welfare check location, but according to the timestamp data, Chen had been dispatched before the original call came in. Unit 12, what time did you receive the dispatch for this call? Dispatch, I logged the call at 3:14 a.m. Why do you ask? Vasquez felt a familiar chill that she'd learned to associate with the temporal anomalies that had been plaguing the county. Unit 12, can you double-check that timestamp? A pause. Confirmed dispatch. My in-car computer shows dispatch received at 3:14 a.m. Is there a problem with the call logs? Vasquez made careful notes while monitoring Chen's progress toward the welfare check location. The GPS tracking showed normal movement patterns, and Chen's radio communications remained clear and professional. But the temporal sequence of the incident defied logical explanation. At 3:26 a.m., according to her console clock, Chen radioed in her arrival at the residence. Dispatch, Unit 12 on scene at 4791 County Road 2847, making contact with the resident. Vasquez logged the arrival time, but when she checked the computer database, the entry showed Chen arriving at 3:09 a.m., 17 minutes before the original call had been received. Over the next hour, Chen conducted a thorough welfare check, determined that the elderly resident was in good health but had been away visiting a neighbor, and completed her report without incident. The case was resolved satisfactorily, but the temporal anomalies in the documentation created a logical impossibility, a successful response to a call that hadn't yet been made. Vasquez documented the discrepancy and continued monitoring routine operations. At 4:45 a.m., a second temporal anomaly appeared in the call logs. Traffic stop number 2024-12-BR-1251 showed Deputy Rodriguez conducting a vehicle stop on Highway 285 at mile marker 134. According to the log timestamps, Rodriguez initiated the stop at 04:45 a.m., conducted a license check at 04:42 a.m., and issued a warning citation at 4:38 a.m., again, a sequence that moved backward through time. Vasquez immediately contacted Rodriguez via radio. Unit 23, this is dispatch. Can you confirm your current status? Dispatch, Unit 23, just completed a traffic stop on Highway 285, mile marker 134. Issued a warning for speeding. Returning to patrol. Unit 23, what time did you initiate that traffic stop? Let me check. Initiated stop at 4:38 a.m., completed at 4:45 a.m. Vasquez compared Rodriguez's report to the computer logs. Rodriguez reported normal temporal sequence. Stop initiated at 04:38, completed at 04:45. But the dispatch computer showed the events in reverse chronological order. She called Deputy Blackwood, who was patrolling the northern sector, to verify whether she was experiencing any unusual equipment behavior. Unit 16, this is dispatch. Are you experiencing any problems with your in-car computer or radio equipment? Negative, dispatch. All systems functioning normally. Why? Just checking on some potential equipment issues. Carry on. Vasquez spent the next 2 hours monitoring all radio communications and comparing them to the automated logging systems. The pattern became increasingly clear. While the deputies experienced normal temporal sequences during their activities, the dispatch computer logged many events in reverse chronological order. By 6:30 a.m., she had documented 7 separate incidents where computer timestamps moved backward through time, creating logical impossibilities in the official record. In each case, the responding officers reported normal time frames and sequences, but the automated systems recorded events occurring before their apparent causes. At 6:45 a.m., Sergeant Martinez arrived for his early shift and reviewed Vasquez's documentation of the temporal anomalies. "Kelly, this is either a serious computer malfunction or something related to the electromagnetic disturbances we've been dealing with," Martinez said after studying the call logs. "I want you to contact Agent Foster at DPS and see if this could be connected to the chronospatial events." Vasquez called Foster, who arrived at the dispatch center within 90 minutes, bringing portable monitoring equipment to test for electromagnetic anomalies. "Ms. Vasquez, can you show me exactly what you've been observing?" Foster asked, setting up his instruments near the dispatch console. Vasquez walked Foster through each anomalous incident, displaying the computer logs and playing the audio recordings. Foster noted the temporal discrepancies while monitoring his electromagnetic field detectors. "I'm reading some interesting data here," Foster said, studying his instruments. "The electromagnetic fields around your dispatch equipment are showing fluctuations similar to what we've measured at other chronospatial anomaly sites. Could that be affecting our computer systems?" "It's possible. Electronic systems, especially those involving precise time measurements and data storage, can be sensitive to electromagnetic field variations. But what you're describing goes beyond simple equipment malfunction." Foster explained that the temporal anomalies in the dispatch logs suggested localized chronospatial displacement events affecting the relationship between cause and effect in electronic record-keeping systems. "Think of it this way," he said. "Your officers are experiencing normal time flows during their activities, but the electronic systems that record those activities are sampling data from slightly different temporal reference frames. The result is documentation that reflects events occurring in non-linear temporal sequences." Vasquez found the explanation both fascinating and deeply troubling. "Agent Foster, if our call logs don't reflect accurate time frames, how can we maintain proper documentation for legal proceedings?" "That's exactly why we need to understand and manage these anomalies. Electronic records are fundamental to modern law enforcement, but they become unreliable when subjected to chronospatial disturbances." Foster recommended installing continuous electromagnetic monitoring equipment in the dispatch center and establishing backup documentation procedures that didn't rely solely on automated timestamps. Over the following week, the monitoring equipment recorded electromagnetic fluctuations that correlated precisely with temporal anomalies in the call logs. The pattern was consistent. During periods of high electromagnetic activity, computer systems logged events in non-chronological sequences, while human operators experienced normal temporal flow. The discovery led to a comprehensive review of electronic evidence and documentation procedures throughout the sheriff's department. Many cases from previous months showed subtle temporal discrepancies that had been overlooked or attributed to simple data entry errors. Vasquez worked with IT specialists and DPS researchers to develop new protocols for dispatch operations under anomalous conditions. The procedures included manual time verification, redundant documentation systems, and cross-referencing between multiple data sources. "The key insight," Foster explained during a training session, "is that human perception of time remains reliable even when electronic systems are affected by electromagnetic disturbances. By maintaining parallel manual records, you can verify the accuracy of automated logs." The training emphasized practical techniques for recognizing when temporal anomalies were occurring and how to maintain operational effectiveness despite electronic system unreliability. Vasquez became expert at identifying the early warning signs of chronospatial events, subtle fluctuations in radio static, minor variations in computer processing speeds, and inconsistencies between different electronic clocks. She learned to manually verify timestamps during suspected anomalous periods and to cross-reference automated logs with handwritten records. On January 8, 2025, Vasquez experienced the most dramatic temporal anomaly of her career. At 2:33 a.m., she received a 911 call reporting a serious vehicle accident on Highway 285 near mile marker 142. 911. What's your emergency? There's been a terrible accident on Highway 285. A truck went off the road and rolled over. I think the driver might be seriously injured. Vasquez immediately dispatched units to the location, while obtaining additional information from the caller. Emergency medical services were notified, and a helicopter was placed on standby for potential medical evacuation. Deputies Chen and Rodriguez arrived on scene at 2:51 a.m. and confirmed the accident. A commercial truck had left the roadway and rolled down an embankment. The driver was unconscious but alive, trapped in the cab. Emergency medical technicians arrived at 3:07 a.m. and began extraction procedures. The driver was successfully removed from the vehicle at 3:23 a.m. and transported by helicopter to the Regional Trauma Center. The incident was handled efficiently and professionally, with all personnel performing according to established protocols. But when Vasquez reviewed the electronic documentation later that morning, she discovered impossible temporal sequences throughout the entire incident. According to the computer logs, the helicopter had departed for the hospital at 2:27 a.m., 6 minutes before the original 911 call was received. Emergency medical services had arrived on scene at 2:19 a.m., 14 minutes before being notified of the accident. Deputies had confirmed the incident at 2:15 a.m., 18 minutes before dispatch. The electronic records showed a completely successful emergency response that had occurred entirely before the emergency was reported. Vasquez's handwritten logs told a different story. Accurate timestamps showing normal cause and effect sequences, with the 911 call at 02:33 a.m., followed by dispatch, response, and resolution in logical chronological order. Agent Foster, we've got our most significant temporal anomaly yet, Martinez reported during his weekly call to DPS. An entire emergency response documented as occurring before the emergency was reported. Foster arrived that afternoon to analyze the incident documentation. His electromagnetic monitoring data showed the strongest chronospatial disturbance yet recorded in the dispatch center, with field fluctuations lasting nearly 2 hours. Sergeant Martinez, what you've documented here is a classic example of retroactive causality in electronic systems, Foster explained. The electromagnetic fields temporarily altered the relationship between cause and effect in your computer databases, creating records that show effects preceding their causes. But the emergency response was real and successful. Absolutely. Your personnel responded to actual events in real time using normal procedures. The temporal anomalies only affected the electronic documentation, not the underlying reality of the situation. Foster's analysis confirmed that human decision-making and physical actions remained unaffected by the chronospatial disturbances. The temporal anomalies were confined to electronic systems and didn't impact operational effectiveness. The emergency response incident became a case study for managing chronospatial anomalies in critical situations. The successful outcome demonstrated that proper training and backup procedures could maintain operational integrity even during significant temporal disturbances. Vasquez developed expertise that made her a resource for other dispatch centers dealing with electromagnetic-related equipment problems. She conducted training seminars and consulted on procedure development for agencies across West Texas. Her final report on dispatch temporal anomalies was completed in February 2025, documenting 127 separate incidents over a 3-month period. The report established protocols that became standard procedure for law enforcement agencies operating in electromagnetically active areas. Analysis demonstrates that chronospatial disturbances affecting electronic systems can be successfully managed through parallel documentation procedures and operator training. While automated timestamp data becomes unreliable during electromagnetic anomalies, human operators maintain accurate temporal perception and can provide verification for electronic records. The key finding is that operational effectiveness is preserved when personnel understand the limitations of electronic systems under anomalous conditions. Vasquez continued working the midnight shift, but her approach to dispatch operations had evolved significantly. She maintained constant awareness of electromagnetic conditions and had developed an intuitive sense for when chronospatial events were developing. It's like being a translator between normal time and computer time, she explained to visiting researchers. The technology sees events differently than we do during anomalous periods, but we can still make sure the important information gets through accurately. The dispatch center became a model facility for chronospatial anomaly management, with continuous monitoring equipment and comprehensive backup procedures. New dispatchers received specialized training in temporal anomaly recognition and documentation verification. On her final shift at the dispatch console, Vasquez handled a routine traffic stop that showed minor timestamp discrepancies in the electronic logs. She noted the anomaly in her manual records, verified the actual sequence of events with the responding officer, and documented the incident according to established protocols. The temporal disturbance was small and easily managed, representing the kind of everyday chronospatial event that had become routine in Brewster County law enforcement operations. As she completed her final log entry, Vasquez reflected on how her understanding of time itself had evolved during her experience with temporal anomalies. She had learned that cause and effect could be more complex than simple linear sequences suggested, but that human perception and judgment remained reliable guides for navigating those complexities. The dried riverbed that marked the eastern boundary of Brewster County's patrol sector stretched endlessly under the pre-dawn darkness, a serpentine scar across the desert landscape that had once carried the Rio Seco before decades of drought reduced it to cracked earth and scattered stone. Deputy Patricia Blackwood had walked this perimeter dozens of times during her 15-year career, but tonight the familiar terrain felt subtly wrong in ways she couldn't immediately articulate. The sensation began as she stepped out of her patrol unit at 04:23 a.m., responding to reports of unauthorized activity along the riverbed's northern section. The call had come from a Border Patrol sensor station 12 miles to the south. Their automated monitoring system had detected movement patterns consistent with multiple individuals crossing the dried riverbed during prohibited hours. Standard protocol required county law enforcement to investigate potential border-related activity in coordination with federal agencies, though the actual international boundary lay another 40 miles south of this location. Blackwood activated her high-powered flashlight and began following the game trail that paralleled the riverbed's eastern bank. The beam illuminated a landscape of mesquite scrub, prickly pear cactus, and weathered limestone outcroppings that provided natural concealment for both wildlife and human activity. She moved methodically, scanning for footprints, disturbed vegetation, or abandoned materials that might indicate recent passage. At 4:31 a.m., she discovered the first anomaly, a section of the riverbed where the dried earth showed clear evidence of recent water flow. The pattern was unmistakable. Smooth channels carved through accumulated sand and debris, water-polished stones arranged in natural flow patterns, and damp soil that compressed under her boots. But according to hydrological surveys, the Rio Seco hadn't carried running water in over 18 months. Blackwood photographed the area extensively, documenting the flow patterns and measuring the width and depth of the channels. The evidence suggested substantial water movement, not a brief flash flood from distant storms, but sustained flow over several hours or days. She radioed the Border Patrol station to report her findings. Station Bravo 7, this is Brewster County Unit 16. I'm investigating your sensor alerts and finding some unusual conditions out here. Copy, Unit 16. What's your status? I've got evidence of recent water flow in the riverbed, but that doesn't correlate with any reported precipitation or upstream releases. Can you confirm your sensor readings? Stand by, Unit 16. After a brief pause, our sensors show movement consistent with multiple individuals, but we're also reading some anomalous environmental data. Temperature fluctuations, humidity spikes, electromagnetic interference that started about 6 hours ago. Blackwood made notes about the sensor anomalies while continuing her investigation along the riverbed. The evidence of water flow extended for approximately 200 yards, then abruptly ceased. Beyond that point, the riverbed returned to its normal drought-stricken condition. Cracked earth baked hard as concrete, no trace of moisture. At 4:47 a.m., she discovered human footprints in the mud created by the mysterious water flow. The prints showed clear tread patterns from modern hiking boots, moving in a generally eastward direction across the riverbed. She counted impressions from at least 4 different individuals, with stride lengths and foot sizes suggesting adult males. But the footprints presented another impossibility. They led directly into a section of limestone cliff that rose 30 feet above the riverbed with no visible climbing routes or access points. The tracks approached the cliff face and simply disappeared, as if the individuals had walked through solid rock. Blackwood examined the cliff carefully, looking for hidden passages, cave entrances, or climbing equipment that might explain how the tracked individuals had proceeded. She found no evidence of ropes, pythons, or other climbing gear. The limestone face was smooth and sheer, offering no natural handholds or ledges that could support the human passage. She documented the footprint trail with photographs and measurements, creating a detailed record of the impossible sequence, clear evidence of multiple individuals walking to a cliff face and vanishing without any apparent means of ascent or concealment. At 5:15 a.m., while photographing the cliff face, Blackwood noticed movement in her peripheral vision. She turned toward the riverbed and saw 4 men in civilian clothing walking eastward across the dried channel, following the same route indicated by the footprints she had discovered. The men appeared to be Hispanic males in their 20s or 30s, wearing jeans, work shirts, and hiking boots. They carried small backpacks and moved with the purposeful pace of people familiar with desert travel. Nothing about their appearance or behavior seemed unusual or threatening. Blackwood called out in both English and Spanish, identifying herself as law enforcement and requesting that the individuals stop for questioning. The men continued walking without acknowledging her presence, showing no reaction to her verbal commands or the bright beam of her flashlight. She moved to intercept the group, but as she approached the riverbed, the men seemed to fade from view, not disappearing suddenly, but becoming gradually less distinct until they were no longer visible. Blackwood found herself standing alone in the dried channel, with no trace of the individuals she had clearly observed moments earlier. She immediately radioed for backup and reported the sighting to the Border Patrol station. Station Bravo 7, Unit 16. I've had visual contact with 4 male subjects in the riverbed area. Subjects failed to respond to verbal commands and are no longer in sight. Requesting additional units for area search. Copy, Unit 16. We're dispatching a unit to your location. Did you observe which direction the subjects were traveling? Eastward, across the riverbed, toward the limestone cliff. But there's no apparent route for them to have continued in that direction. Deputy Rodriguez arrived 25 minutes later, bringing additional radio equipment and night vision optics. Together, they conducted a systematic search of the area, looking for any trace of the individuals Blackwood had observed. Patricia, I'm not finding any fresh sign beyond what you've already documented, Rodriguez reported after examining the riverbed. No footprints, no disturbance patterns, no evidence of recent passage. Blackwood showed Rodriguez the photographs she had taken of the original footprint trail. The images clearly showed boot impressions in mud, but when they returned to the location where the photos had been taken, the ground showed only cracked, dry earth, with no trace of moisture or recent tracks. Marcus, these photos were taken less than an hour ago, Blackwood said, comparing the digital images to the current ground conditions. But it's like the mud never existed. Rodriguez examined the limestone cliff face with night vision equipment, looking for any features that might have been invisible to normal sight. His search revealed no hidden passages, cave entrances, or climbing routes. At 6:45 a.m., as dawn began to brighten the eastern sky, both deputies were conducting a final sweep of the search area when they discovered additional anomalous evidence. Patricia, you need to see this, Rodriguez called from a position about 50 yards upstream from the cliff face. Rodriguez had found a small camp area hidden among the mesquite bushes, a circle of stones arranged for a fire pit, with scattered ash and partially burned wood. The campsite showed signs of recent use, with fresh ash still warm to the touch and food remnants that hadn't yet been disturbed by desert scavengers. But, like the water flow evidence, the campsite presented impossible characteristics. The burned wood was green mesquite, still containing enough moisture to produce heavy smoke when burned. In the drought conditions that had persisted for months, no vegetation in the area retained sufficient moisture content to sustain combustion. Marcus, this wood should be bone dry after 18 months without rain, Blackwood observed, examining the partially burned branches. But it's burning like it was cut from a living tree. They found additional evidence around the campsite: food containers with recent manufacture dates, bottled water that was still cold to the touch, and personal items that showed no weathering despite the harsh desert environment. Most significantly, they discovered a small notebook that had been left near the fire pit. The notebook contained handwritten entries in Spanish, describing a journey across difficult terrain toward El Paso del Tiempo, the passage of time. The entries were dated, but the dates created another temporal impossibility. The most recent entry was dated 3 days in the future, describing events that hadn't yet occurred according to the current calendar. Blackwood photographed all the evidence and collected the notebook as potential evidence of illegal border crossing activity. But as she sealed the items in evidence bags, she noticed that some of the materials were beginning to change appearance. The green wood became visibly drier and more weathered as she watched. The cold water bottles warmed to ambient temperature within minutes. The food containers began showing signs of age and exposure that should have taken weeks to develop. "Patricia, look at this," Rodriguez said, pointing to the notebook she had just sealed in an evidence bag. Through the clear plastic, they could see the handwritten entries fading as if the ink was evaporating. Within 10 minutes, the pages had returned to blank white paper with no trace of the Spanish text that had been clearly visible earlier. Both deputies documented these changes with video recordings, creating a real-time record of evidence deteriorating under observation. The transformations followed a consistent pattern. Items that had appeared fresh and recently used gradually returned to conditions consistent with the long-term drought environment. At 7:30 a.m., Sergeant Martinez arrived with Agent Foster from DPS, who had been monitoring electromagnetic activity in the area through remote sensors. Deputies, we've been tracking significant chronospatial disturbances in this sector since approximately 4 a.m., Foster reported. The electromagnetic readings suggest a major temporal displacement event centered on the riverbed coordinates. Foster's monitoring equipment showed electromagnetic field patterns consistent with those recorded during other chronospatial anomalies, but at intensities significantly higher than previously measured. Agent Foster, we've documented evidence of recent human activity that appears to be deteriorating or disappearing in real time, Blackwood reported. Water flow, footprints, campsite materials, all showing signs of recent use, then returning to drought conditions. That's consistent with temporal echo events, Foster explained. Areas where past conditions temporarily reassert themselves in the present environment. What you're observing could be evidence of historical river flow and human activity from periods when this area had different environmental conditions. Foster showed them historical maps and hydrological data indicating that the Rio Seco had carried regular water flow as recently as 2019. During that period, the area had been a known crossing point for both legitimate travelers and undocumented border crossers. The electromagnetic disturbances may be creating temporal overlaps where past and present environmental conditions coexist temporarily, Foster continued. You're seeing evidence of human activity from when this area was actively used as a travel corridor. Martinez reviewed all the photographic evidence and witness statements, then contacted Border Patrol to coordinate a joint investigation of the temporal anomaly. Agent Foster, if we're dealing with temporal echoes of past events, how do we determine if there's current illegal activity versus historical residue? That's the challenge with chronospatial investigations, Foster admitted. We need to distinguish between genuine present-day activity and temporal displacement events. The key is establishing which evidence exists in current time frame versus which represents echoes from previous periods. Over the following week, continuous monitoring equipment was installed along the riverbed to track electromagnetic activity and document any additional temporal displacement events. The sensors recorded several minor anomalies, but none as dramatic as the incident Blackwood had investigated. Research into historical records revealed that the area had indeed been an active crossing point during periods of regular river flow. Immigration and Border Patrol records from 2018 to 2019 documented numerous encounters with travelers in the exact location where Blackwood had found the impossible evidence. The temporal echoes appeared to be strongest during electromagnetic disturbance events, Foster concluded after analyzing the monitoring data. Past human activity leaves residual patterns that can temporarily manifest under the right chronospatial conditions. Blackwood's investigation established new protocols for distinguishing between current activity and temporal displacement effects during border security operations. The procedures emphasized careful documentation of evidence deterioration patterns and correlation with electromagnetic monitoring data. The riverbed perimeter became a research site for studying temporal echoes and their implications for law enforcement operations. Universities and government agencies collaborated on developing detection methods for chronospatial anomalies that could affect border security assessments. Blackwood continued patrol duties along the eastern perimeter, but her approach had evolved to account for the possibility of encountering temporal displacement events. She learned to recognize the environmental signs that preceded chronospatial anomalies and to document evidence that might exist only temporarily. The hardest part, she explained to visiting researchers, is learning to trust what you observe even when it doesn't make sense according to normal physics. The evidence is real when you find it, even if it doesn't stay real for very long. Her final report on the perimeter breach investigation was filed in March 2025. establishing procedures that became standard protocol for law enforcement operations in chronospatially active areas. Investigation demonstrates that temporal displacement events can create apparent evidence of current human activity that actually represents echoes from historical periods. While the evidence is genuine when observed, it may not persist long enough for conventional processing and analysis. Effective investigation requires rapid documentation and correlation with electromagnetic monitoring data to distinguish between present-day activity and temporal echo events. The key finding is that chronospatial anomalies can significantly complicate border security assessments, but proper training and equipment allow for accurate interpretation of apparent evidence. Blackwood's expertise in temporal echo investigation made her a resource for other agencies dealing with similar anomalies. She conducted training seminars and consulted on cases involving unexplained evidence that appeared and disappeared under observation. The Eastern Perimeter Monitoring Station remained operational, providing continuous data about chronospatial activity along the dried riverbed. New patrol officers received specialized training in temporal anomaly recognition and evidence preservation techniques. On her final patrol of the riverbed area, Blackwood encountered a minor temporal echo event, brief evidence of water flow and human tracks that lasted approximately 15 minutes before fading back to normal drought conditions. She documented the incident according to established protocols, noted the correlation with electromagnetic anomalies, and filed a routine report. The temporal displacement was small and easily managed, representing the kind of everyday chronospatial event that had become routine in border security operations within electromagnetically active areas.